Hey, good weekend to you. Welcome to Leading Edge. I'm Jerry Anderson, and I think you know where I'm starting this week. Or maybe you don't, because, I was actually around about third grade, I think. My parents took our family to Washington, D.C. on summer vacation. We got to tour the U.S. Capitol, and I remember being up there looking down on the U.S. House of Representatives. They weren't in session, but we're with a group of people and looking down, and somebody asked the tour guide, said, okay, that's the U.S. House, and you showed us the Senate. So where does Congress meet? And I sat out, I didn't say anything, little third grader over here, and I started laughing out. I know the answer to this. And I guess it was against that backdrop, because this stuff has always just interested me, and to be in that building, that hallowed building, the history of who has been there and served there. And so when I saw what I saw this week, I was first saddened for what was happening and what I think it meant. And frankly, then it just got me to anger, and I got to work myself through that. And maybe helping me do that. Tall order for my first guest. This is Dr. Nicole Kalaf-Hughes, specialist in American government in her position as an associate professor of political science, Bowling Green State University. Doctor, good to see you. Your students come back mid-month. You tell me at BG, some will be in the classroom, some will be remote learning. But looking at the events of this past midweek, what are you going to tell them happened? What was that we witnessed?
Well, we come back next week, so we'll see kind of what's changed between kind of when we're recording this and a week from now. But what I'm going to tell them first is that was as close to an insurrection as we've had in the modern era of American politics, and that's just not how it's done. And it's not how the rules that the Constitution has laid out for us dictate it should be done.
Yeah.
There's no constitutional precedent for anything like this. And we haven't had something like this in well over 100 years. And so to see what we saw yesterday, see the violence from yesterday, see members of Congress being rushed off the floor is something unprecedented.
Yeah, we're recording the day after and I'm going to, you said almost an insurrection. I'm going to use insurrection. I looked it up, an act or instance of revolting against civil authority or an established government. That's an insurrection. That's what we saw. I could also go with coup, a violent overthrow or alteration of an existing government by a small group. I think both of those apply. Inside the building, a time-honored constitutional process was taking place, the counting of certified electors from all of our states in the presidential election. Nothing's ever been overturned there. But these rioters were led to believe that could happen. It could happen on Wednesday. Led to believe by whom?
By the president. By people who work with the president, by people who support the president. They've been given bad information, and they're working with things that are just not true. And they're using that essentially to inform their decision making. They're taking what he says, the words that he used at his rally that was going on right when they were starting this in Congress, and they did essentially exactly what he said, which was go to the Capitol and, wreak havoc.
The president, his people, but I'm going to give you, I think that the members of the U.S. Congress on both the House and Senate side who said we are going to stand up, we are going to demand that these go back to states, I think they were also part of feeding this idea that you could overturn a constitutionally protected election on this Wednesday. When you study American government or teach it as you do, Dr. Kalaf-Hughes, how important is it, do you think, that people believe the elections of their leaders are legitimate?
I think it's really important. And I think that's going to be one of the problems going forward is no matter what happens in the next, 2 weeks, you're going to have people who believe essentially the lies that they've heard. People need to believe that the elections are legitimate, that things are done in a legitimate way. And one of the really neat things, for as many frustrations there are with the American system, one of the neat things is that our elections are so disaggregated, they're done at the state level. Yeah. States have pretty much complete authority in elections as long as you're not running afoul of the Constitution, right, things like discrimination. And because of that, wide-scale voter fraud is almost impossible because it's so disaggregated. There is no one overreaching US election commission that runs everything at every state level. And so part of what a lot of these groups are alleging, and the Republican members of Congress who kind of went along with what the president was arguing, just isn't possible from a working standpoint, because that level of wide-scale fraud just doesn't happen in our elections. There's no evidence of that type of fraud ever.
Mitt Romney, who stood up and said, the best thing we could do right now is just tell the people the truth. And I thought, yeah, the truth. I built a career trying to be on the right side of truth, whether I liked it or not. Did the events of Wednesday surprise you?
The fact that there was a presidential rally followed by the first part, like the protest, didn't surprise me at all. The fact that it turned into essentially a riot and an insurrection that was able to actually get into the Capitol, to break glass, to go into the chambers, to go into the offices, that surprised me. The angry mob didn't really surprise me so much. They've been talking about that for months. The fact that they were successfully able to actually get through security, breach the building, break the windows, that we actually saw a loss of life from this, that aspect surprised me, because I think I had a little bit more faith.
There are going to be a lot of questions about why there wasn't more preparation. I mean, I had actually, and I'm not a seer, you guys, but I had predicted this. So I didn't predict on January 6th, but weeks ago I said, before this is done, there will be an armed, somebody's going to die, there's going to be bloodshed, and there was. I need to take a break. Can you hang?
Yes.
All right, Dr. Nicole Kalaf-Hughes, Associate Professor of Political Science, BGSU. My guest will be back on Leading Edge right after this.